Hello and welcome to the Bookshelf Odyssey Podcast. My name is Art and we are exploring my bookshelves. And today we are taking a journey into the deepest, darkest, and dustiest corner of my library, the science section. Now, I've got to confess that science was never a favorite subject of mine in school, but today I have a guest who is not only an excellent scientist, she is adept at helping guys like me understand and have fun with science. She's just written a book that's going to be published in June. It's called There Are No Stupid Questions in Science, and she's my guest today. So welcome, Leah Elson, to the Bookshelf Odyssey Podcast.
Art, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
I was telling you off camera that I was really excited to have you on. I love to learn new things, and I feel like this is going to be one of those episodes.
I'm excited to be here because, I think as a podcast guest, you tend to get sucked into your silo, right, with other scientists and things like that. But you are my demographic. You are my a little bit science wary, but my demographic nonetheless. So welcome to the flock, Art.
All right. The things of science that when I can understand, I'm just amazed that it's amazing how the universe is put together, how things work, how I just went to the zoo yesterday just to kind of walk around, and there's some new baby elephants at the zoo, and the docent was talking about how they learn to eat by taking food out of its mother's mouth so they know what is healthy for them.
Interesting.
And then kind of gross, but they'll also eat their mother's dung so that introduces enzymes and bacteria that helps them digest real food. And I'm like, that's amazing.
Well, there's evidence to suggest that your gut flora is actually from the vaginal tract of your mother. So it's kind of a similar thing where you get populated and seeded with flora from your maternal source. And so it's interesting that the elephants decided to take it a different direction, but it's a similar premise.
The lady who was working there, she's I won't even guess how old she is, but she looks to be about grandma age, and here she is talking about elephant dung, and it looks like it was the highlight of her day, you know.
That's the thing about scientists, and we really are kind of in an age of science and technology, and because of that, science has become so hyper specialized, right? You no longer find just a biologist or just a chemist, right? You find a biologist that specializes in the fungus that grows under the toenails of sloths in a certain country, right? It is so hyper specialized. And so you hear some of these people on podium or giving tours or lectures, and they light up, right? She's like, my life has been dedicated to elephant poop. So she's here for it. I love that. I love the enthusiasm.
She said, plus, I get to hang out with baby elephants all day, so it's not such a bad job. Yeah.
What more could you want, honestly?
Right. Well, before we get too much farther in, I always like to ask my guests about what they're reading. So have you read anything lately you'd like to share with us?
I just finished lessons in chemistry. So I am classically not a fiction reader. I love nonfiction. My fiction, obviously you got to stick with the classics. I love a Dostoevsky, things like that, but I'm a big nonfiction buff. So right now I'm reading Brian Greene, like The Hidden Reality. This man is a theoretical physicist who describes parallel universes, and from a physics standpoint, how plausible are some of these outlandish ideas like quantum realities and infinite versions of yourself, et cetera. So he really attacks it from the applied principles, and you read through his books and you're like, maybe we are a simulation. Maybe, maybe there are multiple parallel universes with people just like me. So I'm reading some of that. I am just about done with Atomic Habits, which I think everyone in the world has read it, but I was late to the game on that. I'm also reading I think it's called The Psychopath Next Door, or The Sociopath Next Door, which is just a look at the large amount of human beings that were sort of born with a lack of frontal lobe activity, and they have these sort of sociopathic proclivities, and they're more abundant and frequent than you might think in the general population. So an interesting smattering of nonfiction. It's usually on my desk.
That last one you mentioned sounds interesting to me. I'm reading it's a fiction book right now. It's called Buried, and it's part of a series of an FBI agent. She investigates serial killers, and that's the premise of this book series. And
Fascinating.
yeah, her specialty is studying like psychopaths and sociopaths, and how there are those that commit crimes, but there's also those who don't commit crime, and they go into you know different fields. Like in this particular book, she's studying one who's a politician, which explains
Interesting.
explains so much about our government right now. Yeah. And I forget the author's name now, but I really enjoyed her first book, and the second one it's a real thrilling mystery. So
That, to commit to a series, I feel like you have to be pretty invested. So are you a sort of serial killer series to watch like on Netflix? Is that your
yeah.
proclivity? You like that?
I'm not sure. I hadn't really thought. I There's some of my sounds weird to say, but they are some of my favorite bad guy. Something about the way they work or operate or think, I find just real fascinating and kind of creepy.
Really methodical, right? Incredibly
Yeah, yeah,
methodical.
yeah. So I don't know what that says about me, but but yeah, it's um, like well, one of the popular ones was Dexter. Was
Y-
a TV series,
Yep.
and I read the book series. I haven't read or I haven't watched the series at all, but that's probably one that most people are familiar with.
It's really good. And then, of course, the controversial Dahmer that was just released on Netflix. I've heard that a lot of people thought that it didn't portray the victims in an especially good light, but I thought that it gave a lot of, I think, background to it, because all you heard were the fantastic headlines for so long and all of the terrible things that happened. But I think it really sort of spotlights who the victims were.
Hmm.
But fascinating. And I know that the actor that played Dahmer is, I think, still reeling psychologically for how deep of a dive he had to take to be that actor, or to be
Yeah,
that character.
goodness, yeah. Sometimes I worry about actors, the way they get a little too too into
Es-
it.
Especially method actors, right?
Right, right. Um, Ellison Cooper is the lady who writes the series I was talking about. Really good
Awesome.
mysteries. Yeah, if you like mysteries, they're really good.
I love it. I love a good book recommendation.
Yeah, well, that's what we're all about here. So, uh, well, and then you gave several books that you're reading as good recommendations. So I might have to try look at those and see if I can make heads or tails of them. So,
I think to keep with your cadence of the sort of thriller piece, you should definitely do the psychopaths one.
yeah, yeah, that one I'm definitely gonna check out for sure. So let's talk a little bit more about yourself. How what led you into the sciences? Tell us a bit about your career and what you're doing right now.
So I was always sort of that quintessential science geek as a child, and I was a
Mhm.
black sheep for that. I didn't have scientific figureheads in my family, but I was definitely that kid that, when, kids were starting to date in junior high and get boyfriends and girlfriends, I was able to name for you the taxonomy of dinosaurs. And so I was always exceptionally geeky. And I think a lot of it is just scientists have this deep desire to maintain curiosity from childhood and into adulthood. We are the why people. Why, how. And I deviated a little bit in college. I was actually sportscasting, of all things.
Mm.
I didn't know, when you're kind of discovering what it is you want to do with your life, but I found that to be sort of intellectually bankrupt. So I quit sportscasting and then went back into the sciences, and it's kind of been, the best thing to have ever happened to me to switch my horses midstream in college. And I went and obtained several graduate degrees, and have been now in research, embroiled in upstream medical research for the last 14 years. And I love it. I love everything about it. Currently, I work in the field of peripheral nerve repair. So I work in biotech, and I help to champion new methods and new technologies that can be used to help patients recover from really devastating nerve injuries. So if they
Mm.
lose motor function or sensation in their limbs after like a car accident or something, maybe 20 years ago that used to sort of be that was a deficit for life. But in sort of embroiling in this field of neuroscience and peripheral nerve repair, I'm lucky enough to be a part of a group where we can sort of help patients regain that motor function and sensory
Hmm.
recovery, which is awesome.
Really, my only experience with that is through reading books, and there's there's another series I enjoy reading. It's the Harry Dresden series, and he's a wizard slash private eye, so it's really fun.
I love that.
it well, then there's a kind of a subplot where he had his hand burned horribly in something, and they said he wouldn't be able to use his hand again, but through the use of magic and different things, he was able to regrow things. But
I was going to say, this is not a barrier for this wizard slash PI.
right. Yeah.
That's awesome.
But yeah, that's the only thing I could think of now when you were talking about that. But in real life, where we can't just wave our magic wand and feel better,
Exactly. But
you're doing good work there.
art imitates life, right? So there you go.
Right.
There's the challenges of peripheral nerve repair.
Yes, yes. um, so and then now you were involved in helping, like I said, people like me understand science better. So what are some ways you've been doing that?
So I think you could say I have dueling scientific careers. The one is my 9 to 5. I'm a scientist by day, but I'm a science communicator the rest of the time. And so I have started a couple of different web series, and they really started by just amusing my friends with sort of ascending levels of dangerous chemical explosions live on camera on Facebook Live, just to amuse
Nice.
my friends. And everybody kept saying, "Man, you should really take this public." And I actually torched a shower curtain to ashes completely because I was showing the principles of dual phase rocket engines in my bathroom. And I torched this shower curtain and was like live on camera. And I was like, I think I'm done with explosions and science in the house. So I took this science instruction public, and it just became sort of science lectures. And very soon on Instagram, I started a web series called 60 Seconds of Science. I started having followers that accumulated, and they began requesting topics, anything from deflating eyeballs to sweating
Mm.
blood to what is dark matter, all kinds of questions. And I took all comers, I answered everything. And I sort of gained momentum in that capacity, and I really found a joy for it. But most importantly, what I found is that one, adults' scientific questions are exceptionally childlike, but the more childlike the nature of the question, it usually evokes the most elegant responses. And so I kept pursuing this, honing in on my craft and explaining everything I could. And then one day I was driving in the car, and I was like, man, somebody should really write a book just addressing the world's questions scientifically. And I was like, man, I should write that book. And so I did. And so I wrote There Are No Stupid Questions in Science as sort of an extension of my internet following, and
Mhm.
homage to them, but also to just reach a broader audience. Right now, science has a really bad PR problem. And so anything I can do to try to reinstate the public's trust in its scientists, I'm here to do. So
I was just thinking how the last couple of years, especially, science has become very important and yet often ignored too, and it's, I don't know, it's kind of a strange path it's
it
taken.
it's a weird dichotomy,
Yeah.
like I said earlier, we live in an age of science and technology, but there has been, I think part of it is social media and the ease with which you can spread pseudoscience and misinformation. And so there's been this championing of myth and pseudoscience and claims that are completely unsubstantiated by social media influencers, and it spreads like wildfire.
Mm.
And then there is also sort of the traditional media outlets, which know that if they put up an inflammatory headline that's pseudoscience based and they can bring on a couple of different people to argue, that will draw a lot of attention, right? And all that attention also drives a lot of advertising money. And so you're seeing traditional media and social media sort of spread these firestorms of misinformation in the world of science. And I think people mistrust science because of it, because they're like, well, this article said this, and then these scientists are saying this, and then these other scientists are saying this. So I get it. I understand why people would be exceptionally confused. But that's where science communicators like myself try to step in and say, let me help you sort through some of this nonsense.
So to kind of help us know what's fact and fiction, or between that, or who's just trying to, I don't know, get downloads on their article or what, how can we navigate through that? I mean, obviously people like you help, but how can we do that?
It's a great question. And something that I would say is to look at the substantiation, right? If somebody just writes an article on something, that's an opinion, right? That's
Mm,
not, there are no real opinions in science, right? That's subjective information. You want to try to find the most objective information possible. And if you see an article written, let's say about the safety of eggs, right? People in the news love to be like, eggs are dangerous. Just kidding. Eggs are the
mm,
best thing for you. And it flip flops like every other year.
mm-hmm,
And if you're reading an article on it, look to see, was there peer reviewed literature that was published, meaning that a group of scientists got together, did some experiments, and then put those experiments on the chopping block for their peers, anonymized, to review and say, yes, there's credence to this or not. And then if the scientific community agrees that, yeah, these experiments and this hypothesis has credence, we can publish it. So look to see, were there scientific findings that back that up. And you can find stuff, especially with your health, on websites like PubMed, right? These are big indexes of all of the publications that scientists put out. And it can be a little overwhelming because there are about 2.5 million peer reviewed publications that are released
mm,
every single year. But there are places to look for that. And there are news syndicates like Live Science and Science Alert that are composed of a bunch of scientific journalists that do their due diligence and go through those stacks so that you don't have to. So there are people out there that sort of give you the objective information. So be wary of what seems to be opinion, or if somebody's selling you something. But if it seems like it's scientifically backed, you're usually got a good bet.
okay, yeah, that's helpful, definitely. Because I don't know how many people I've heard, and will say, like, post on social media that, well, here's what they say, the scientists say, but I think it should be this or whatever. And I'm like, okay, but if, somebody's like operating on my brain, I don't want them to say, well, I think it's this,
Exactly. Well, and this is the thing that's most frustrating, is that science is this dynamic compendium of information that is always moving forward in a positive manner. Whether or
Mhm,
not the hypotheses of scientists end up being right or wrong, that information still contributes to our overall understanding. And so if you are a person who is not a scientist arguing with scientists about science, you're not correct. That's wrong information, right?
right.
And because science is objective, it's always meant to be, and it's always self-challenging and self-bettering and molding itself to suit recent findings. And so it's tough, because people are like, well, this one person on thyroidmom.com says that she took a bunch of ginseng and it cured her right up, and you're like, well, thyroid mom also does not have any scientific background as far as I'm
Right.
aware. So it's hard, and I think that there's a lot of confirmation bias where
Oh,
in
sure.
order to understand science, it requires a really rigorous background. And so it's difficult for the average person to take scientific findings and extrapolate, what's useful, what's not. And so they end up relying on people that look like them, that sound like them, that have similar jobs that they do. But it's like me trying to describe what an electrician is doing and how, I don't know, that's not my wheelhouse, right? So
Right.
it becomes tough. It's a really tough thing in a world where we have unlimited access to information, which is beautiful. Oftentimes the real information gets lost in the fray.
Right. It's like I always say that the internet is a good thing if you use it right,
Exactly. The internet can absolutely be weaponized.
Yes,
Absolutely.
absolutely. To talk a little bit more about your book. Now it's called "There Are No Stupid Questions in Science," but the word "no" is kind of in parentheses here. So, does that mean to imply that there maybe are a few?
I would think that there are probably some stupid questions that exist in the world, but insofar as science is concerned, absolutely not, right?
Mm,
Because the biggest findings in human history started with the question why, right?
mhm,
Newton decided to conceptualize what gravity was and measure gravity because he said, why? He sees things falling. He sees that we're attracted to the surface of the earth. Why is that? Why are there these patterns of stellar bodies that orbit in the way that they do? Why? So everyone always asks why, and there's no stupid questions as far as science is concerned. But anything else, yeah, absolutely. I've definitely heard some stupid questions in my day.
Oh, I'm sure. Now, can you share any of them, or?
Oh my gosh. I mean, just in the day to day, like, oh, where have you seen my keys? And I'm like, they're in
Oh,
your
yeah.
hand.
Right, right. Boy, that sounds like a question I ask all the time. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm the same. My glasses are on my face, and I'm like, have you seen
Right.
my glasses anywhere? That's me.
Yeah, yeah. Check on your face, right? And so, for your book, what are you hoping your book will accomplish when it's published?
You know, I one of the greatest joys that I've had as a public science communicator is just inspiring people in a realm that they didn't previously understand, right? Sparking a previously snuffed out bit of curiosity. And one of the greatest, I think, compliments that I get somewhat frequently from followers that say, "Hey, I want you to know that I sucked at science in school. I've never understood it, but I've been a follower of yours for X amount of years because you have made me see how exciting and fun and amazing science is. And I always share the things that I learned from you with my friends, and I think I'm brilliant." And, or people sending me video feed of their children, at the kitchen table with a bunch of glassware making a mess, like in a white coat. And it's because, they may have shown them some of my content. And in order to effectively do what I do, it requires a lot of inspiring of people that may have been wary in the past. And I'm just hoping, even if one person laughs at one of my corny jokes in the book, or if they feel like, man, this is really cool, or somebody not sure if they want to go into the sciences reads it and they get inspired by it, then my job is done.
Mm.
Bestseller lists and all of that doesn't really matter to me. I'm here for, if I can reach a person with this, then I've done my job.
Yeah, and there's just I don't know. There's no greater feeling than knowing somebody's connected with something you've done or created or whatever. And
Of
yeah.
course. And if so much of being a social media presence is, you often feel like you're just kind of speaking into a void, right? There's this
Hmm.
kind of vacuous, that's very nebulous, and you don't know if the messaging is ever going to hit. And I'm always surprised when it does, right? I've been doing this now, concerted public science communication, for going on 6 years. And I'm always shocked, like what hits with an audience and what doesn't. And so it's always an interesting thing to see.
Yeah. So kind of jumping off that, I thought one of the things you had mentioned you are open to talk about is women in science. Now, it has seemed in maybe it's starting to change more these days, but that the science field has been a predominantly male field. And what's your experience been like in this, in your journey?
Sure. Well, it's been sort of studied and published ad nauseum that about 30% of researchers worldwide are women. So it
Mm.
is still resoundingly male. And I have always been a proponent for trying to bolster groups of people who have been traditionally underrepresented in science, and encourage them to go in. Because when I was growing up, my idol in the sciences was everybody's idol who's my age, is Bill Nye, right? But
Hmm.
he is a sort of older white male, and you didn't see any females or people of color that were represented in the sciences. And it is very well studied and known that, if kids can't see it, they can't be it, right? And so I like to challenge the notion of what does a scientist look like, especially if somebody looks like me, knowing that I am a minority in my group. And obviously, there are some strange power dynamics when you're a part of a minority group. And there are instances where people in my position absolutely get taken advantage of in, some extreme ways that I've always been very open about. And I think that it is the responsibility of my generation to sort of break down those barriers for those coming after me. This is not sort of where we pass the buck by any means. It's important to be vocal about the experiences that we've had to try to kind of nip them in the bud for those coming in the future.
So it's kind of realizing there's a problem and then taking some active steps to find a solution to that.
Of course. And I think,
Yeah,
a lot of people want to canonize science and medicine because, if there's going to be collaboration and cooperation and respect anywhere, surely it's the sciences, right? And so often you find that that's not the case. And, I find that the more vocal people are about it, the more it dissuades, because they're going to be scummy people in every field. But
sure.
the more that you can kind of put it on blast, I think the more it dissuades people from trying to take advantage of that power dynamic imbalance.
Yeah, yeah. Now, what has been one of the most challenging things for you as you've pursued your career?
I think one of the most challenging things is continuing to feel like I have to prove my intellectual worth in a room. Kind of didn't come from an advantaged background. I was very disadvantaged socioeconomically and otherwise. And I worked incredibly hard to go to Ivy League institutions under my own steam. I worked full time through Harvard, through Johns Hopkins, through USC. And, it's not until someone announces where I've been or what I've done, or they find out organically, that I think that respect level is finally achieved. And so that's kind of a continuing struggle is, you know, also not just the public facing, what does a scientist look like, but it's also internal, right? What does a
Mhm.
scientist look like? They look like anybody, right?
Right,
And
right.
and I sort of have embraced it, I think, to an extreme degree. I used to be very self-conscious of that, but as I've become older, I'm in my late 30s now. I have a full sleeve of tattoos that's all science, right? It's like beakers and DNA and all kinds of things. And I have a little nose ring and I challenge that. I'm like, you can say what you want, but my credentialing speaks for itself,
Mhm.
and so I've kind of taken it to the extreme, but that's a struggle that continues, is
Hmm.
that proving of your worth.
This might be a unanswerable question, but what's the solution to that to do better at that?
I think a lot of it comes from our male counterparts because so much of male bravado is checked by other men, right? Women can sort of stand up for my part and shut it down from a very localized, discrete level, right? Maybe in your own workplace or in your own department. But I think systematically, it's male allies that will commend your work when you're not in the room, that will defend you when you're not within earshot, and will sort of check this pervasive, albeit getting better, but and part of the old school mentality, but misogynistic tendency that some
Hmm.
people, not all people. I actually am currently in a lovely workplace, and most of the scientists there are women now. But I think a lot of it comes from male allies. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
So, men out there, be good, and do good.
Absolutely. Please do. Especially if you have
Yes.
daughters. Come on now.
Oh yeah, yeah. I have one daughter, and yeah, I love it.
You get
Um,
it.
yep, yep. She comes home from school and tells me all the things like things guys have said to her and stuff, and it's like, come on, guys, do
Yeah.
better, do better.
Yeah. And as a dad, you're sort of like trying to suppress the rage, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yep. There's that too. Yeah,
of
it's like
course.
keep your grimy hands off her.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. That dad protection is real.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, yeah. Well, if folks want to watch some of your videos, like the 60 Seconds of Science, where can they find them? Uh,
The easiest way to find me, I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram.
mhm.
My handle makes no sense. It's gnarly by nature, and nature is spelled with a silent G in the beginning because I thought I was clever at the time. But if that's too much to remember, you can go to my website, leahelson.com, and I've got a bunch of little icons for you to click on to link you direct to my social media to make it a bit easier.
All right, awesome. Now, do you have a favorite scientist or somebody that inspired you?
Sure. I mean, she, rest her soul, she is passed now, but I would say that any female in science would tell you Marie Curie. She was the first person to receive two Nobel Prizes, one in physics and one in chemistry, and was sort of a bastion of discovery in her era. and really paved the way for women back when there were no women in the sciences. You're talking kind of turn of the century discoveries, but that really paved the way, not just for women, but for science in general, right?
Mhm.
And she was a brilliant physicist, and so definitely Marie Curie. And I think every female in science would probably say that.
Awesome. Now, see, I'm showing my ignorance because I know the name, and wasn't it something with that she discovered? Was it radioactivity or?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Radioactivity and atomic decay, and that kind of mechanism, and paved the way for that whole branch of physics. So
yeah,
so you're not, you said you're ignorant on the subject. Absolutely not. You nailed it.
okay. Well, okay. So now I gotta. The only reason I can remember that is because there's a line about her in the Disney movie Enchanted. I don't know.
Really? I haven't
Yeah,
seen it.
yeah. It this one it came out 10, 12 years ago. I don't know. It has Amy Adams in it, and it's about it like a Disney princess that comes into the real world. It was one of our kids' favorites for a long time, and they mention her in passing, and that's so it just kind of sticks in my
Amazing.
head.
I
Yeah,
love these moments where you're like, where did I file that away in my memory
right.
bank that I would just pull that out of nowhere?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, so I like to watch princess movies. So what are you
That's
gonna?
fair.
That's
Listen, you're
I've
a
got a
daughter
daughter.
dad. I get it.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. I got a daughter. Yeah. All right, and then another question I was going to ask about uh, reading books about science. Is there must-read books about science that you would recommend everybody
Of
should
course.
read?
Oh, of course. A Brief History of Time,
Hmm.
quintessential Stephen Hawking. And I think people are scared of it because it's Stephen Hawking, right? One of the most known theoretical physicists of the time.
Yeah.
But he's actually very funny and kind of wry, and you would be very surprised. It's a super easy read, kind of about the evolution of the universe at large. Uh, Mostly anything by Neil deGrasse Tyson. I mean, Astrophysics for People in a Hurry. It was on the New York Times bestseller list for like over a year, I think,
Mm.
for a reason. Fantastic. He is also another person that just makes science so relatable and so beautiful, especially something as complex as astrophysics. So those are two of the classics that I think that everyone would enjoy. And even if you just audiobook it, amazing. Both of them are amazing.
Mm. Now, do you have a favorite science field, maybe even beyond what you're studying right now or what you're involved in?
Oh,
Uh,
of course. I love anything cosmologic, quantum physics. I always said that if I had to do it over again, I would switch fields because I'm in medical research now. But I am so fascinated by the quantum realm and this idea that particles sort of assume this dualistic nature until you view them, and the act of sort of observing the world around you is what snaps it into reality. And it sounds very science fiction, but it's actually predicated in hard-nosed quantum physics and in science.
mm,
And it's kind of bleeding edge, next level, really kind of championing the limits of human understanding of what is the fabric of our universe made out of, when you're
mhm.
extrapolating down subatomic particles and then the particles that make up those particles, and then how are those particles connected to others. It's fascinating. So I always said if I had to do it over, probably the quantum world I would dive into.
Well, again, I have to bring up movies, but the my
Do it.
only my only experience with the quantum realm is the
Ant-Man. Oh,
Ant-Man Marvel
yes.
movies. Yeah, yeah, that's about my level there.
Yeah, yeah. It's I'm looking forward to seeing the is it Quantum Madness is
Yeah,
coming
yeah,
out
like
soon?
Quantumania, I think it
Yeah.
is. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love those films, and I'm looking forward to it. So yeah,
Oh, they're great. They're great. I mean, so much of the science is so inaccurate, but it doesn't
I
matter because
imagine.
they're tremendous. They're such amazing films. They're my favorite.
Okay, good. Yeah, yeah. I see they can get away with it with me because I don't. It's like, okay, that sounds right. I mean, he's saying it with confidence. It must be true. Yeah.
Exactly. If you say it loud enough, it's true.
Okay, got it. So time travel's possible.
Exactly. Exactly.
Those are that's another favorite kind of book I like to read is about time travel and things. As a scientist, what are your thoughts on that?
So time travel is, I suppose you could say, possible, but the interesting thing about time travel or like teleportation, for instance, some of these
Hmm.
weird sort of next level concepts, is that they are possible, but not in the way that we are used to sort of portraying them in contemporary media and culture.
Mm.
So for something like teleportation, we're used to seeing Star Trek, right? Where you get
Hmm.
dissolved and then sort of reassembled elsewhere, and you just hope that everything went into place exactly as it should be.
Right.
And teleportation, quote unquote, is sort of possible now through something called quantum entanglement. But instead of mass being transferred from one site to another, it's data instantaneously. So it's sort of the state of a particle, right? Which direction is it spinning? How large is it, et cetera. We can transmit that data somewhat instantaneously. And we call this our teleportation. And this leads us to, in the future, the capacity to do quantum computing, because right now, our processing speeds are too low, and we're sort of reaching a maximal level, a ceiling of how fast we can process things. And for really big problems like how do we cure cancer, how do we effectively get astronauts to Mars, we need a lot of processing power so that we can do it quickly and we can figure out these big mathematical problems quickly. And so quantum computing, where you sort of, instead of binary code, you have sort of linked binary code, and you transmit data instantaneously between one part of the chip to the other, more or less.
Hmm.
So that teleportation is possible. And time travel, it's due to certain paradoxes, it's actually impossible to go back in time, but it's possible to travel forward in time due to a concept called time dilation. And it's all relativistic. So if you were to sort of begin to approach the speed of light, say you were like a really good runner and you got a good Nike sponsorship and you could run at a speed that approached the speed of light, relative to you, time would sort of slow down. Um, where you were relativistic, but everywhere else, like if your friends were eating at a restaurant somewhere and you kind of booked it off the planet, the earth would still sort of maintain its regular time cadence. And so if you've seen the movie Interstellar,
Hmm.
and some of the dilation principles associated with being around a black hole and an extreme amount of gravity, it's a similar principle where time slows down for them, but it maintains its same pace back home. So by the time they get back home, they've sort of time traveled to the future just by relativistic strangeness of time dilation. So yes, time travel is possible, but it's not the way you would think. It's not like you get into a little pod and then you spin a dial and you travel to whatever year that is. And it's impossible to go backward in time, actually.
All right. So you're saying there's a chance, though? No.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
you just to start training and be able to run really fast.
Got it. Okay.
You certainly can.
I think I can run about a 30-minute mile. I don't know. How's that?
I think you could crawl a 30-minute mile.
Yeah. Now, talking about, I was just thinking of Interstellar when you were talking about all that. Now, are there movies that you would say this gets the science right, or at least close to right?
Sure, sure. Interstellar, definitely. And
Hmm.
The Martian is actually really
Mm.
good. They did their due diligence with respect to, what would happen if his pod got a leak and what are the things he's contending with for survival, actually. But yeah, Interstellar has been lauded by so many of my colleagues in the fields of astrophysics, et cetera, for its accuracy and its interesting depiction of this sort of quantum reality, right? Because he kind of goes back and he's seeing all of these different realities play out before him when he enters the singularity. And that's interesting because that's all theoretical, right? But the way that they portrayed it was beautiful because, to see something that you only see in mathematical equations played out on a big screen and what the artists thought that might look like
Yeah.
was amazing. Kind of, it looked kind of like to me, like film reel almost. Everything was kind of on these strings and he could kind of peek at certain realities discreetly. But yeah, they killed it, definitely.
Mm. That's why I didn't understand it. Okay. No.
Stick with it, Art. You got this. My
No,
favorite
no.
student of science.
All right. No, I had heard that like that film got it right, and it was actually not that confusing as I was joking, but it was. something about being able to visualize it kind of helped with that.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's so tremendously helpful. So many people are visual learners, and I think
Mm,
that's where sometimes science is sticky for people to learn, or why students turn their backs to it quite early on, is because the lectures are sort of dry. It's a lot of physics equations, et cetera. But I think the next step in elevating education is to tap into how everyone learns, because it's so different,
mm.
visual, auditory. But I'm a visual learner, so I totally get it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, back when I was in school, there was pretty much one way of being taught, and you're gonna get a lecture, you're gonna sit there and be quiet, and
Yep. You're going
and
to take
so
this test, and
yep,
it's
and
going to determine your future.
right, oh, okay, no pressure now, yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
and now my daughter, she's in 8th grade, and I have two boys, and one's in finishing up high school, the other's in college, and then so the approach to teaching them is so different now, and there's been a lot of learning with that I think has been great.
Yeah. And I think what was interesting is during COVID, how teaching had to pivot to account for quarantine.
Hmm.
And that was very fascinating too. And I'm sure there's sort of good and bad that came out of that. But
Hmm.
it's been an interesting couple of years, definitely, for the expansion of learning.
Yeah, my daughter did not like the online learning, but
Really?
my son, my middle son, he loves it. It's like, this is great. I can just be on my computer. I don't have to go to school. I don't have to be around people. It's can just
I feel like that is something a high schooler would really latch onto, right?
yeah,
Just constant quarantining.
yep. Like, he's living his best life.
Yeah,
I
I
can
did
just
that myself. There wasn't COVID when I was in high school, but I still did that myself. So that's
yeah,
okay.
right. What future projects then will you be working on? Once you get your book out, where do you see yourself going next?
Well, I'm actually already writing my second book, and it's out for review now. And so we will see if that gets picked up anywhere. So something that I never anticipated for myself was being an author. I think a lot of people, they grow up and they take a bunch of, writing courses and creative writing, and they get MAs, and I sort of fell into it through serendipity and just a lot of, like, I told you before we started recording earlier, that I have very reckless spontaneity. So I'm like, yeah, I'll write a book. Why not? Right. And so I enjoyed writing the first one so much. It was such a blast to write. It's a blast to read, and it is really carved out for me such a wonderfully strong love for writing. I've always loved reading. I've been an avid, voracious reader, but
Hmm.
now that has become sort of a branch of my career that I want to see flourish and take off. And so that's my next biggest, closest project, is book number two.
All right. Now, will it be similar to the one you just published, or is it going to be different?
It's a bit more traditional nonfiction. So There Are
Hmm.
No Stupid Questions in Science is sort of a compendium of questions asked to me over the years that I didn't answer. And they're, what is dark matter, to why do men have nipples, to, all kinds of strange questions, and all of scientific focuses. And the second book is a bit more investigative journalism in nature. And this is about contemporary snake oil and pseudoscience. So
Ah,
kind of taking a
timely.
hammer to some of that. Yeah, very
Yeah,
timely.
very
Very
timely.
timely.
Yeah. Well, all right. I had to laugh about why do men have nipples? My daughter asked that once, and so I told her, well, they're pacifiers, and she was horrified because we were teasing her like, yeah, when you were a baby and cry, mom wasn't home. We just latch you on, and, and she's like, no, no, no.
That's phenomenal. She's gonna come back for you. When she reads the actual reason, she's gonna say,
Yeah,
"Ah, see, I knew it."
yeah. All right. Well, I'll have to give her the book then.
Should I give you the answer so you can relay it to her?
Yeah. Go
And
ahead.
now that we talked about it, the listeners are
Okay.
probably like, just tell us.
Yeah.
So, embryologically, when you are forming very early on, you have the machinery to be both male and female. And as you develop as a fetus, you develop bilateral features. And that includes your arms and your legs and your toes. One of those bilateral features is nipples. And so everyone comes equipped with nipples, and shortly thereafter, embryologically, a switch gets flipped and the body determines, okay, we're going to be male or female at this point. But before that, you're kind of just a big nebulous both genders at one time. And so
Mm.
men not only have nipples, but they also have a series of mammary glands and ductwork, and they're just non-functional at this point because the endocrine cascade and the hormones. But surprisingly, about 1% of breast cancer patients are male,
Mm-hmm.
because they still have all of the ductwork and everything that is still has a proclivity to develop cancer for one reason or the other. So that's why it's not because they're pacifiers, listeners. It's because embryologically that was before your gender was determined in utero.
Okay. Well, that makes more sense. Yeah.
Just a little bit more sense.
Just a little bit more. Boy, I tell you what, I'm learning all kinds of things here.
I love it. I love it.
This is great. All right. Well, then I was, yeah, I just made my brain go off track completely now. All right. Well, Leah, I want to thank you so much for coming on today. Real quick, what's your website where people can find you?
Sure. It's super easy. LeahElson.com.
LeahElson.com. All right. And I guess as the final question, you can take us out with, what is one thing about science, whether it's the universe, our bodies, whatever, that just leaves you in absolute amazement?
Oh, that is that we have truly no concept as to whether or not the universe is infinite.
Mm,
When we measure the expanse of the universe, we're talking about our observable universe, but the universe is expanding at a rate that is actually accelerating. And so there are galaxies at the edges of the universe that are actually traveling relatively faster than the speed of light. And we will never be able to observe the edges of our universe. And so conceptually, thinking about what does infinity actually mean? Is this something where there is just no bounds to our universe? I mean, to me, that is fascinating and sort of horrifying all in the same sentence.
yeah. Oh man, that's cool. I see what you mean though. Kind of fascinating and horrifying. It's almost frightening to think about. That.
A bit frightening. And then if you
Yeah.
think, that the universe was composed of, very specific pieces of atoms that became full atoms and then became matter. And so if there's an infinite universe, then there are an infinite number of possibilities for an Earth to develop, and an infinite number of possibilities for animals and humans to develop on that planet. And so there might be an infinite number of you, right?
Mm.
An infinite number of you out in this infinite expanse. And that to me is something that I stay up late at night thinking about.
Great.
Truth be told. Yeah. So
Well,
you're
now
welcome.
I will too. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seeded that, incepted it into your brain now.
Well, to the other me out there that has their life together and has it all working out for them, let me know how you did it. So,
There in an infinite universe, there's a you out there that is a famous scientist. So
oh, cool.
let that make your noodle.
Okay. Wow. All right. Well, that's scary to think about, but suppose there's another version of me that's a brain surgeon. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Sky's the limit. A famous
Sky.
actor, everything.
All right. Well, send me some money then, would you?
Exactly. Just wire it. It's fine.
That's right. Yep. All right. Well, Leah, thank you again for coming on. And folks, check out her website, check out her videos, her book coming out. I can't wait to read it. So thank you for coming on today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Take care.